I'd like to remind you that for more Microsoft webcasts, you can go to microsoft.com/webcasts. Thanks again for joining us for today's presentation, The Value of Business Intelligence with SQL Server 2008. Now it is my pleasure to introduce today's presenters, Julie Strauss, who's a product manager at Microsoft, and Donald Farmer, who's the principal program manager for SQL Server Analysis Services at Microsoft. Julie, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Heather. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are. My name is Julie Strauss, and I'm the product manager for both analysis services and as well as reporting services. I've been with Microsoft for 7 years now, been in different divisions and in different positions, through technical support, pure marketing, and now in product management. But all the time I've been working with business intelligence, which I find really exciting. And with me today, too, I have Donald Farmer, which some of you may already know if you've been attending conferences or other sessions, since he used to work with integration services. So, Donald, why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, thanks very much, Julie. I've been with Microsoft for 6 years, and I first, in fact, joined the analysis services team. It's true that I'm kind of more associated in people's minds, I think, with integration services, because I worked on that product for 5 years. But in fact, I originally joined Microsoft to work in analysis services, and I'm delighted to be working on that product again and be showing you some of the new features of analysis services in SQL Server 2008 later on. So thanks very much for this opportunity, Julie.
You're very welcome. Talking about demos, the content for today is predominantly going to be focused on SQL Server Business Intelligence, more specifically on reporting services as well as analysis services. So obviously, data warehousing and integration services is a big part of our BI strategy for SQL too, but since we have separate sessions on that, we'll just very quickly touch base on that in this session. It will approximately be split half and half on slides and demos. So we'll have Donald give us a lot of good demos on, in particular, analysis services. Before I jump into the actual new areas of BI with SQL Server 2008, I just want to put BI in context of two other important areas. So one is obviously SQL, the core SQL Server engine, of which both analysis services and reporting services are part of. And in addition, set it in context to the overall Microsoft Business Intelligence strategy, which we play an important role of too. So looking at the upcoming release of SQL Server 2008, you can see the 4 key design pillars on the left in this slide, where pervasive insight, which is basically business intelligence, has its own pillar. So again, this year it was the case with the release of 2005. Business intelligence has a really, really dedicated focus, and it's a key investment area for us. So that's just to put it in context of the SQL Server release overall. And we will have separate sessions on the enterprise data platform, the beyond relational, which is basically giving us the opportunity to not just look at structural data, but also combine that with unstructured data and the growing type of data volumes that we see. And then development, the dynamic development, which is the introduction of, for example, a new feature or a new capability that we call the entity data model, which is all about making it easier to dynamically develop applications based on entities and then combine that together. So, but for deep dive on this, please pay attention to the 2008 webcasts that are coming up, and I will show a link at the end of the session for where you can go to get more information on these other core areas of the release of SQL Server 2008. So now we know that business intelligence is a key part of SQL Server, and it is also a key part of Microsoft Business Intelligence. So as you see here, the SQL Server component is really counting for the BI platform, so the platform for the entire Microsoft BI offering. So at the lower level, we have the integration services, pulling data into your data warehouse, which then enables you to do your relational reporting as well as your multidimensional analysis. So basically at the platform level. At the end user tools and application level, we then have Excel, which some of you may know, we did a lot of efforts with the release of SQL Server 2005 Service Pack 2 for native consumption of data within Excel. And that is a key area we'll keep investing in with 2008 and even beyond that. Then in addition, we have Performance Point Server, which we'll be releasing now in September, which depends on, rely on analysis services at the back end. And then finally, we have the whole delivery mechanism on SharePoint, where we again have done a lot of tight integration to, for example, enable the delivery of both analytical views from analysis services as well as relational and managed reports from reporting services within SharePoint. So this is kind of where the Microsoft SQL Server BI technologies fit into that overall theme of business intelligence within Microsoft. So diving into the specifics of SQL Server 2008 and some of the challenges we are trying to address there. We see three overlying themes that we are addressing. So not just with the release of 2008, but with the SQL Server 2008 roles as a BI platform. So one, our first key area is obviously the distributed data across the enterprise. So this is where integration services come in, tied to the non-relational data, where the focus will be to enable you to really integrate data from any data source and combine that into a data warehouse to do analysis on top of that. Next part is some of the challenges that organization experience today with delivering relevant information across the organization. And finally, one thing is delivering the information, but how do we actually make it actionable? How can any end user go in and take action on what they see? And that has been the focus, again, with the release of 2008. So if we look at the key pillars and how we're trying to address these, we have three core themes. So we want you to be able to integrate any data. We want you to be able to deliver relevant information. And finally, to drive those actionable insights. And if we translate that into kind of the server component that corresponds to the services, the three BI services, integration services, reporting services, and analysis services. So think of integration services as your entry into your data warehouse. You populate diverse sets of data. You combine them. Then you have reporting services, which is your structured reporting vehicle to deliver information out to across enterprise to help users understand what's going on within your business. So it's looking into the predefined areas of your business, like how your sales doing, how are your HR doing, how are your financials, and it gives you the ability to, for example, see all your sales, weekly sales being pushed out to you every Monday at 12 o'clock. Then you move on to analysis. Let's say you see from your sales that sales are declining from your sales report. What are you going to do to find out why? Probably you don't want to keep processing reports to find out that. That is where you move into the analysis space, where you will look into the whys. So you'll slice and dice your data. You're not looking for anything specific. You're just trying to discover what are the new areas that you're trying to gain insight to, and from there take your action. Take action on that insight. So that is kind of the overall themes for the SQL Server BI component. And if we go into specifically what was driving the design and the development of SQL Server 2008, we'll look at three design pillars. And these work across all the BI technologies, so both integration services and reporting services and analysis services, even though the wording may change, but conceptually they are the same. So one key area is design. So that is for the developer. So for reporting services, the focus was on, or is, on enabling the report author to design more flexible, powerful reports. For analysis services, it's about how to design the right cubes, do the right aggregations, etc. After that, you have the actual processing, which is all about performance and scale. So how do we reach all our users with reporting services? How do we make the aggregations, the processing faster on analysis services? How do we enable you to store more data in your data warehouse? And then finally, the last one, how does all this come together and give you end users a really good experience? So if I move, you can kind of see that in 3 different areas. So it's focused on decreasing developer productivity, improve performance, and enrich the end user experience. That's kind of how you can think of the value of the SQL Server 2008 release. And the rest of this presentation will really dive into what are the specific features you can expect to see in SQL Server 2008 that will enable you to experience these improvements. So just to make sure we're not neglecting it, a quick slide on kind of the improvement areas that we did for, or are working on for data warehousing and integration services. It's really about enabling you to integrate growing volumes of data with integration services. So we've done some pipeline improvements where we will help you, the integration packages, to scale better and make resource use more visible and available. We have data chain capture, which is a generic component that will track database changes and expose the changes through a relational interface, which can very easily be consumed for the IT. On the data warehouse side, this is probably where we did the most of the focus efforts for the release of 2008. It's really bringing SQL Server 2008 to the next level when it comes to data warehousing. And there's a lot of different improvements there, and we have a whole session on that. It's available for download now out on the website. So we have data compression as one example, which is really about enabling to store data more efficiently and reduce your storage costs. We have the resource governor, which enables you to define resource limits and priorities for different workloads. So it will enable you to have concurrent workloads to provide and still provide more consistent performance. So with that, we will spend the rest of the time specifically on reporting services and analysis services. So here you see the 3 core investment areas again. They've changed a little bit. So since we're talking about reporting services, this is really about authoring reports, processing reports, and the end-user experience. And since a lot of the information we'll be talking about today really depends on kind of the level of the CTPs we're at, my focus areas today would really be on the top part, so the authoring experience, where we have a new report designer that I'll be showing you later. We have enhanced visualization and rich text support, which I will show you in action, and I'll show more slides on that, because that is already available now, and I do encourage you to go and have a look at the CTPs that we have available to get some hands-on experience with the new improvements, and obviously provide the feedback, feed that back to us. The next core theme is really the processing. So it's the scalable report engine. And what do we mean by that? Well, basically, we have spent the last 2 years, even before we shipped 2005, to redesign the report engine. And why did we do that? Well, initially when we were thinking about reporting services, we thought, well, there'll be a big need to scale across many, many users, so we need that. But people are probably not going to execute and process 1,000-page reports. But guess we were actually wrong, and people do want that. So we took a new stab at what is it that we can do to make that report engine scale to large volumes of data to a large number of users. But rest assured, for your experience, the end user experience, the upgrade experience, nothing will change. So all the changes we have made, you will actually see will get its regular upgrade when you upgrade to SQL Server 2008. But I'll talk a little bit more about that when we come into the report design. And then the other part of it is that we enable a IIS agnostic report deployment, which is really the fact that we have removed the dependency on IIS with SQL Server 2008. So basically, we will be leveraging or reusing some of the SQL Server components, which has a lot of great benefits, such as additional value for reporting services, and also the fact that we can leverage more of the enterprise features that are available as part of the core engine. And then finally, we have the end-user experience. We have new word rendering, which some of you may have heard about the acquisition that we announced back in May of the code base for the software components or the Office Writer components from the company called Soft Artisan. So basically, this is the code base for allowing end users and developers to author reports directly in Word and Excel. Now, there's multiple parts of that, and for 2008, what we'll be focusing on is delivering a new Word renderer, so you can actually process reports to the Word where users can consume it, and then we have improved our Excel rendering. Now, at the next stage, we will, which will most likely be post-Katmai, we will, or SQL Server 2008, we will look at how to actually enable the actual authoring. So that is kind of the core themes for reporting services. So now we'll be diving into the flexible report authoring. And there are kind of four key areas that we have. We have the introduction of TableX, we have visualizations, rich text support, and a new report designer. So I will be talking a lot more about TableX. So for those of you familiar with SQL Server reporting services for 2005, you know that we had or have 4 different data regions. So we have table, matrix, chart, and list. And now we're introducing a 5th one, which is TableX. And TableX is, put very short, it's a merge between a table and a matrix. And I will go much more into detail in the next slide about what that really means. But at the end of the day, the reason for doing it is to provide much more flexibility in the design area of your reporting process. Then next thing we have is the visualization. That's another acquisition which we announced at TEGAT, which is the acquisition of the code base for Dundas visualizations components. And for SQL Server 2008, we will be focusing on incorporating the new charts and gauges. So there was a lot more components as part of the acquisition, and we will be incorporating that moving forward. But primary focus right now is to get the charts and the gauges in there to provide a really rich end-user experience and the ability to build dashboard. And it's an area we have had a lot of customers requests for. So that's going to be really interesting to see, and I will show you quickly some of that. So rich text support is basically the ability to combine different text strings within one dialog. And and that's another key area that we have, which basically allows you to support more efficient creation of legal documents. And finally, we have the report designer, and which will have a new layout. And it has to do with the fact that we redesigned the engine, which allowed, and we introduced table X, so we had the opportunity to actually change the design surface. And hopefully what you'll see is a much more user-friendly area of that, and we will make it much easier for end users to get started, and developers to get started designing reports. And I will show you that in a second when we see, when we get to the demos. So what is table X? Table X is basically a merge between table and matrix. So it basically combines everything that was available with table and make it available together with matrix. So you don't have to choose. You can start with either a table and a matrix, and then design starting from that starting point. So if you look at tables today, you are able to you have the fixed columns, but you have dynamic rows. In table X, you have dynamic rows and columns, but you cannot have fixed rows and columns. So that's kind of the merge of those two. And I'll be showing this in action in just a few seconds. So here I have an animation to just very quickly show you what it's all about. I have the traditional table on your left and your matrix on the other side, and they will actually combine like that. So that is table X in a nutshell. So let's go through quickly 3 examples to illustrate for you how this would actually look like, to hopefully try and give you an idea of what it is that I'm trying to explain here. So here you see a common scenario with a traditional matrix report where you have your regions like Washington and Oregon on your rows, and you have 2005 and 2006 on the columns, and then you have your cities within that. What you really want to have is you don't want to have a separate column for total. You really want to have Washington and Oregon show the amount for totals, but not actually display total. In addition to that, you want to have it incented, so not have the stepped report, the block report that you see on the left, but more the step 1 that you see on your right side. So another example is here where we have 2 matrices, which is basically side by side. So you have your sales for Washington and Oregon for 2005 and 2006, and then you have it for products too. So we have the for tables and for chairs. And if you want to show this in one report, you basically have to do 2 matrices and trying to overlap them. And what will happen when you introduce table X is basically that you can combine these 2. So with table X, you can simply have 2 independent hierarchies, like year and product, both sitting within the same data region. So you can reuse the row hierarchies for more efficient design. And then the last example, so that is what you have there, how it all comes together. And the last example here, we have a block structure of cities and salespeople. Here, what you do want to have like both your average and count in the total, but not really out in front of the 2 individuals, because it simply doesn't make any sense. So what will happen is for each of the salespeople, you just want the sales, whereas for total, you want sales in addition to count and average. With table X, this will look like that. So you see much more usable reports. It will make a lot more sense to the end users. So again, when it comes to upgrades, there's no need to panic. What will happen is, even if the RDL has been redesigned, what will happen is the time you actually launch an existing 2005 report or 2005 RDL into your BI Development Studio, it will automatically upgrade. So you don't have to do anything, just launch it and it will upgrade. For the ones you're not launching within BI Development Studio, they will actually upgrade at runtime. So as soon as they get processed by the report engine, they will upgrade to Table Lakes or to the new RDL. So next part that I quickly want to just show you some of the visualizations that you can expect to see with the release of 2008. So this again refers to the acquisition of Dundas. So you have a chart here on the right where you see the axis breaks. You have a pyramid chart, a polar area, and some of the error bands. So just different types. As you can see, they are quite a lot more rich than what we are currently seeing in reporting services. And we have the gauges, which we also hope to be able to include in 2008. Again, different kind of graphics, making nice dashboards and quick reports to show. And finally, we have the maps, which will probably come in post-Katmai. So, but that's just for you to see which direction we're going and what to expect later on. So let me move on to the demo. And I'll go in here and share my desktop with you. Let me just go in here and share like that. And hopefully you should be able to see my desktop now. Hopefully you do. So this is the new design surface for reporting services. And as of now, which is the July CTP, this actually launches as a separate report designer. And it's just because we're in the early phase. It will get integrated into Visual Studio. But we wanted to make sure that we made it right. Yes?
It looks like people aren't seeing your desktop, so I think you'll need to log out and log back in.
Okay. Just 1 second.
Really regular basis, and some of the features you're seeing here are in CTP that's available now, and some are going to be coming out in a CTP that we'll make available around the timescale of our past conference, which is in September. CTPs are always driven by the build process and how ready the release is, but that's a target, is to make some of these available at the past conference. So that's when you're going to see probably most of the features that we've been talking about suddenly kind of light up there. And there will be a one just further beyond that. Yeah, it looks like we're going to see Julie's report in a moment. There we go. I can
you see it?
stop answering questions at this point.
Thank you. So this is, as I mentioned before, where you couldn't see anything, you were kept in blind, is the new designer, and it's for reporting services. So it is in preview, meaning that it will change. It will be embedded into Visual Studio. And some of the things that you see here will actually change. So if you go and download the CDP, the July CDP, which is available now, and we will be providing the links at the end, this is what you'll see. So a lot of the focus for this release was ease of use. So first thing you see here in the middle is that you need to click here to create a data source. So what happens with existing version, that people that are used to designing reports feels really comfortable with Visual Studio and the BI Development Studio and the report designer. But for new people, the feedback we are getting is it's hard to get started. Where do I start? Which direction should I go, etc. So what will happen here is I will be prompted to do things in the right order. So if I go over here and I drag on, for example, a table, this is Table Lakes still, but the starting point is still kept as table or matrix. And what that does is simply enabling me to use the structure that I'm used to for now, but it doesn't matter where I start. So if I build a table, I can always add dynamic columns moving on. So, and I will show you how that will actually work. So I can go in here and create a data connection. I'll just quickly connect to my local host. That's pretty standard process, so no big deal. Now what I need to do is to generate my data set. And this is an early view, so we don't have the nice editors to actually go in and design those yet. They will be added later. So what I'm doing now is just basically importing a query that I already prepared. And for some users, this is how they do. They get a query from IT that they will then use. And log out of this one, like that. And that is what I'm doing now. Some people will go and design their own data set, and that's fine, but that will come in the next CTP. So what you see now is a different simplified data region. So normally you would do your drag and drop onto here, and looking back, that was what most people saw as the easy way to design both report and analytical views, is the drag and drop. And it's a positive feature area. However, what we learned through a lot of the Office research is that drag and drop is not that easy. It can be difficult to know where do you want to drop it, etc. So we have taken some of the learnings from Office, and you can see that this actually does align to Office, the Office look and feel that we have here. And what we're doing here, if I click a cell, I can go in and choose the little list over here, and I will see a list for the actual values I can choose to put in this field. So I add cells, and what you'll see is sum of cells. So even the formula has been simplified, so it's much easier for me to see what this is. It's the sum of cells. Now if I do want to see the entire formula, I can still do that if I want to, but at a first glance, it's very easy to see. Another thing I can do here, let's say I have my sales and I want to group that type product. I can still right click as you used to, and I can add a group, and I'll add a parent group which should be grouped by product category like that. And also what I can do is, let's say for the product category, I actually want to, okay, let me just change that at a product category. I wanted that to be on the rows like that, and at my product category. There you go. So that was the standard way of doing it. I can still do that. What you see down here is some fields for my row and column grouping. And that is, again, some customer feedback we have taken that it's hard to understand grouping. So what is it that I group on? Where do I group it? How will it actually apply? So what we've done here is trying to simplify that process. And I can simply say, let's say I next want to group by subcategory. I can simply drag and drop this one to place it where I want. So first I want to group by the product category and then by subcategory. And what you see there is it will simply nicely go in there, and I can just delete some of these columns. So now I have a pretty simple report. Now if I process this, it does have all the details that I would have of a table. So I will have each individual sale here, which I don't really want, so I can go in and delete that. Simply right-click it and delete it. And I will delete just the group, or I will, like that. And so now if I process this report, I can just go in and format it to, I want it with currency and no decimals. And I can process this report. It may take a little while because of the data set, and I'm actually running this live on my PC, so it's not a VPC. There you see I have my bikes, my subcategories, and my sales. So to show you some of table X, the new would be if I could actually add years to here. So the sales for each of the years, but as a dynamic column, but still reuse the same row values. So let me just quickly do that. So I can go in here and add a group adjacent to the right. And I want that to be based on order year, like that. And again, I want the sum of sales, right? But here I actually want year, like that. And here, of course, I can still go in. I can do my regular formatting, like I can do in any Office document. I can change the font, like that. I can change the colors, the background to any color, dark green, and the text to white. So just to show you some of the flexibility that you have in there, I can make this one bold, and again, adjust the format with 0 decimals, like that. So I'm now ready to reprocess my report. One thing before I actually show you how this will look like, I just want to show you the snap to lines, which was on one of the previous slides. So I can take a text box and drag it in here, like that, and I can say, this is my sales report. And I can make that a little bit smaller. And so here I can see, here my snap to lines in blue. So I can see, for example, for sales, now it's a little bit harder to see since this is not a very large report. So I can say I can snap it to the front of that row or column, to the back of it, to the side, and in the front. So it makes it very easy for me to adjust where I want it. It's especially important when I work with big reports. So that's one area. Let me just give this a name too. Products, like that. And I can, one last thing I want to show you before I process this report is the built-in fields. So very often what we hear back is it can be hard to understand what fields are actually available for me. So here I can pretty easily take my page number and simply drag it down there. And I can centralize that, and I have page numbers of my report. So I can go in and preview. And again, it's a very simple report, but it will show you, this should actually have set 2002 and 2003, a problem with the design person, I think. So you can see how I have my product categories, my subcategories, my sales, which is a fixed column, and then dynamic columns and year. So this is basically the change you have from table X. So that should give you an idea of how this is actually working, what the investment areas are that we have been focusing on. So I also want to quickly show you some of the visualization. So I can just go in and delete this. I want to use the same data set. So I can go in here and drag a chart in. So for this CTP, we only the chart has made it so far. So you'll see more come in the later CTPs. So basically drag and drop my chart over here, and I can start populating it. So I want to see my product categories and the sales, for example. And now I can go in and process it, just to give you a quick view. So this looks very nice, but still, since there's a big difference in the volumes between bikes and accessories and clothing, it's pretty hard to see what these values really are. So what I want to do now is go back and show you some of the break axes which are new. A new thing that you see here too is the properties. So it's local for the data region that you're clicking on. So if, for example, take the legend up here, I can right-click that and choose properties there. So again, if I compare this to 2005, you have all the same properties, but it was a big dialogue where we're trying to push everything into one. Here we're trying to split out and make it more in context of what you're working with. So I'll go to my axes. These are the new dialog boxes too, which apply for all the dialog boxes across the report designer. So I'll go into my axes, and for my value axes, which are my sales, I will go in and add axis breaks. And you can see how that will actually come to life in when I process the chart again, or my report with this chart. So I can go in, and now hopefully it should be easier to see the relative value of each of these. So you can see the breaks, how they stop there and jump in values. So that should give you an idea of kind of some of the flexibility that you will see in here. So the next thing I want to show you is also in the visualization, but I want to show you how to have dual axes. And I'm just going to actually reverse my values here. So I will do, I want to see my sales. Whoops, that was not correct. I want to see my sales for both my product categories. I did it again. For my product categories, as well as my sales territories, like that. So now you see I have my product categories, and next to that, my sales territory. But I want to introduce this as a different axis, so it's easier for me to see that these are actually two very different kind of values. So I can go in here, and I have introduced, I can just take the axis break off. I can go into my data, and I say, here I have my two series. They're both showing columns. I can show range, I can show scatter, or line. In this case, I'm going to choose a line. So you can see I have my product categories there and the sales for the territories across from there. And I'll go in and actually define that on my second axis. So I'll just title this territory like that. And we can make it 3D just to show some of the power of that, and say OK. So this is how that will actually appear when you have multiple axes on this thing. So this was just charting. In addition to that, we'll have the gauges coming. Later versions, we'll see the maps, etc. But hopefully this gives you an idea of the direction that we are moving into. So with that, I will move back to the presentation for a few slides and move into the analysis services part of the presentation. Let me see, make sure that I am all there. And talk a little bit, a few slides, and then I will give the floor to Donald to show more demos on analysis services. And I guess Donald will probably have to log in and log out again. So we'll just go through this and hopefully see him back in as soon as he's done. So analysis services. As for reporting services, it's also around design, the processing, and the experience. Or this is actually the monitoring. So it's for the IT experience. So design, what is that? This is more the experience for the developer, not so much for the design flexibility, but for designing it right. So looking at our experience with Analysis Services 2005, we made it really easy to build reports. So you've probably seen the demos like click, 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 and you actually could pretty easily generate or create a cube that were ready to use. And that was definitely a good step in the right direction that would allow a much broader audience to actually create cubes and allow more organizations to enjoy the benefits of OLAP. However, what we often saw, we're still seeing, is that when those cubes are designed, very often people leave it there and they kind of forget to go back in and optimize for performance. So it's quickly generated and it may work just for a few people, but you may run into problems when you want to actually deploy to hundreds of users or hundreds of gigabytes. And it's not because it's not possible, it is there, but we just didn't make it very accessible for the developer to go in and find out where to optimize. So a big part of the investment efforts for 2008 is to make it easy to design the cube right the first time. So for that, we have a couple of new designers, new cube designer, design alerts, and dimension design. And I will show that in more detail, and Donald will actually give us a preview of how you can expect this to look when you install SQL Server 2008. The next part of it is processing, the actual run the cubes. So that's performance. So does that mean that 2005 does not perform? No, it does not mean that. But for the premise of OLAP is really access to aggregated data and huge amounts of data at the speed of thought. And by that, we keep and see organizations keep store more data and want to make that accessible for analysis. So with that, we need to keep focusing on improving performance. So as data volumes grow, we can still keep up with delivering superior performance, because that is the premise of OLAP. It is really quick access to pre-aggregated data. Last part of it is monitoring. So that's basically an IT request for improved monitoring of the resources that are being used. And I will quickly go through that in the next slide too. So optimize report design. And that is really the theme for Design It Right. We want to reduce and keep reducing the cost of actually designing it, so it still has to be quickly. But in addition to that, we want to make it very easy for the developer to see where you can optimize. And a big part of that is what we call the best practice design alerts, also referenced to as AMO alerts, so AMO warning. So you may be hearing that throughout the presentation and the time to follow. And that is basically a set of best practices that we have collected since the release of UConn. So it's what we've been learning for customers, from partners, things we learned internally from our field, from consulting, and simply from our own development team, and where they simply look at the code and saying, well, if you did X, you would experience or expect much better performance. So, for example, try to avoid using parent-child. You forget to set, for example, strong hierarchies, etc. So you will get these small warnings, and it's not pop-ups. Nothing blocks you from moving on. It's simply what we call real-time squiggly alerts, which is Donald will show it in his demo, but it's a little squiggly under alerting you that you could do something here to improve your design. So we've basically taken more than 40 best practices and incorporated into the design tools that will alert the users at design time. So some of you may know BPA from the relational database, and this is a bit along the same lines. The big difference being that you don't actually have to complete your application and then run the tool. You get your small alerts and warnings while you are designing. So it's very easy, and you can obviously choose to dismiss them either for the project you're working on or globally. So if you have full control over your design and what you want to do, you don't have to be bothered with seeing these squigglies. You can simply disable that. And with that, we will move to Donald. If Donald, you can share your desktop.
Thank you very much, Julie. I'll just start sharing my desktop now and see if people can see this in action.
Yay.
Okay. And remember that you can use F5 to see this full screen if you want to see the full designer experience. Let me just auto-hide this panel, a bit more to see. Okay, so I'm in the Analysis Services Designer, and I'm going to build a new time dimension in this cube that I already have defined. And as I build that new time dimension, you'll see some of the features that we have been talking about. The first thing I'm going to, yeah?
I think we might have lost your demo.
We've
Can
lost
you just
my
try exiting out of it and then clicking on that resource again?
Okay. Let's get out of here. And back to sharing. How is that looking?
Try moving your mouse around.
I definitely see you.
Yeah, I think it's frozen.
Is it?
I do actually see you, but I don't know if it makes a difference.
Yeah, I can see me as well on my monitoring machine, but shall I exit and come back in?
Yes, I think you'll have to.
Okay. That's, sorry about that, folks. I'll back out in a moment.
Actually, I see that several people can see you.
Oh,
now you do.
Well, now I've exited. So.
Okay, bye-bye, Donald.
Good while it lasted. Okay, let's get back in.
One is here we have that, in 2005 it was possible to create reports in Report Designer using report models, and will that be possible too? So one of the core reasons why we actually chose to build the Report Designer outside Visual Studio this time and then embed afterwards is actually to make that ability even stronger. So the prime focus of the designer for 2008 is actually that it shouldn't matter where your report initially was designed. You should be able to go in and modify. So let's say one disadvantage we have today is that if you design a report in BI Development Studio in the Report Designer, you can't use Report Builder to actually go back and open that and modify it. That is some of the changes we are hoping to be able to apply for 2008, where we'll actually say it doesn't matter where your report was created, you as a developer, as an end user, can go in and modify your report. And I think Donald is back.
Yes, I think people can probably see me now. And if not, somebody should holler, but I'm going to carry on and demonstrate this. So I'm in the Visual Studio Designer for Analysis Services. I'm going to create a new dimension. And as I'm creating a new dimension, you'll see some of these features we've been talking about light up. I'm going to select New Dimension, and again, as before in 2005, the Dimension Wizard appears. But you'll immediately notice on the next page that the Dimension Wizard itself changed a little. We've added a number of new options. Anybody who did, for instance, generating timetables previously probably had to jump through a few hoops to make that happen, and we've made that much easier. But in this case, I'm just going to start with an existing table, existing timetable in my star schema, and I'm going to select from Data Source View. In this case, I'm going to choose, of course, dim time to be my main table. And the name column, in this case, I'm going to choose the date as the name column. And the key column will be time key as is already selected. And that's my source for the time dimension. And the next choice I have to make is what attributes I would like to show. Now there's a number of choices here, but one of the first things I'm going to do is just rename time key to be date. And then the next choice I'm going to do is to select a number of kind of lower attributes. For in this case, I'm going to choose, for example, the day number of week. And I'm not going to enable that for browsing. In other words, it's not going to show up in a hierarchy. I'm not going to be able to add this to a hierarchy. So I'm going to say it's the day number of week. I think I'll choose day number of month and day number of year as well. And in both these cases, I will not enable these for browsing. So I'm going to just say that. These can't be browsed. This also means that they won't be available in hierarchies. I'm going to choose calendar quarter, calendar year, calendar semester, and I will allow these to be browsed in hierarchies. Another thing I'd like to do is find the month name. So let's just browse down here, and find the English month name. And in fact, although I'm going to choose it as English month name, I'm just going to rename that as month, so it appears as month. And again, this will be browsable. Now, in this case, this is fine. I can change the attribute type here to be a calendar, and in fact, I can change it to be calendar month. So that now tells me what type of attribute this is going to be. So I've now set some attributes that I can browse and some attributes that I can't browse, and you'll see the significance of that in a moment. I'm just going to call this new time to distinguish it from my existing time dimension, and click Finish. And again, as usual, when I click Finish, we're going to open the Dimension Designer. And the first thing you should notice in Dimension Designer is what Julie so poetically called the blue squiggly. And the blue squiggly is the feature that tells you that there's a problem here. Now, if I need to find out what the blue squiggly means, I can hover over it, and it tells me that I should create hierarchies, because I'm not creating a parent-child dimension, so I need some hierarchies here. So the blue squiggly in this case tells me a warning that I should be creating hierarchies. Another thing to point out is that some of the member attributes are actually grayed out. These member properties, day number of month, day number of week, day number of year, they're grayed out because they're the ones I said I didn't want to be browsable and therefore can't be used to build hierarchies. So already we're giving quite a bit of kind of visual feedback here about what's possible. So I'm going to create a new hierarchy, pretty straightforward one here. I'm going to create year, semester, quarter, down at that point. I'd also like to drag in month, and then at the lowest level of the hierarchy, we'll drag in date at the bottom level. Now notice again that there's another blue squiggly and a warning sign, and this time under hierarchy, and it tells us that attribute relationships do not exist, and this would result in decreased query performance. So again, from our experience of building in 2005, we know that people quite often built these hierarchies without relationships defined, and that caused problems, so we're surfacing that as a warning. I'm just going to rename the hierarchy here, so I have something here. So let's just call that calendar. So I've got a more interesting name than hierarchy. So at this point, I'd like to model the attribute relationships. So on the attribute relationships tab, I now see my members laid out in this way. I can see year, quarter, semester, month, and of course they're all related to date, but they're not related to each other. So what I'd like to do is create a relationships by hierarchies where semester relates to year, and quarter to semester, and month to quarter. And now I've defined this set of relationships. And you'll notice at this point, no blue squigglies at this point. However, what I'd also like to do here is just to show you some of the other problems that people can run into. If I expand date, you'll notice that we actually auto-collapsed all the member properties under date, just to because these are uninteresting attributes that you shouldn't be using for modeling. But you can imagine that I'm perhaps a sort of impatient modeler, perhaps, and I would like to try something that, in fact, even best practices say that we shouldn't. So if I, for example, drag day number of month to month here, that in fact creates not a blue squiggly, but a red squiggly. Squiggly obviously being a technical term in this usage. And the squiggly here tells me there's an error. It's a red squiggly, and that means that this is a problem that must be fixed. It's not just a warning. Well, let's be even more badly behaved and do some other things here. So let's drag from date to month. Now what I've got is a blue line which appears with a warning. So I've got an error and a warning. If I want to see what the error is, I can mouse over, and it'll tell me that the attribute hierarchy must be enabled if attribute relationships are used. So I haven't enabled this for browsing, so I can't really use this to build relationships. If I go with a warning equally, I'll see that this is a redundant relationship. Why is it a redundant relationship? Because I've enabled now two ways to browse from month to date, and that's redundant. I've got two methods of doing that. So the easiest way to fix both of these problems, of course, would be to delete this relationship. When I delete that relationship, it will go back to no red squiggly, and again the blue squiggly and the blue warning disappears because I now only have one way to navigate between date and month. So it's pretty interesting that I get these warnings, and these warnings are often performance related. But of course there may be cases where I want to dismiss a particular warning, or say that, well, okay, this is actually how I want to model it, even though I know it may cause me some problems later on in terms of my performance. In fact, performance isn't an issue for me. I'd rather have these different ways of navigating. If that was the case, and you can see that we still have some warnings appearing for time here, which said that avoid using visual attribute hierarchies, it is possible for me to dismiss some of those warnings. The way in which I can do that is to build the project. No need to deploy it in this case, I'm just going to build. And when I build the project, we'll go through the usual build process, and we'll populate the error list with any of the warnings that were generated during execution of the build. So build is started at the moment and has now succeeded. And if I look at the error list here, I can see this from the view menu if I need to, but I've pinned it here already. You can see that I actually have a set of 65 warnings, in this case, telling me different problems that are there in the project. Now remember that these are warnings, these are not errors, so I don't have to fix them. I could choose, in fact, to accept some of them. So let's scroll down and see if there's any related to my time dimension. Well, it's related to customers and employees and so on. But let's get down to find the time dimension, or new time dimension, I think is the one I should be looking at. One moment here. Here we go. Here's new time dimension, and I can see here that, in fact, it's warning me to avoid visible attribute hierarchies or to define attribute relationships as rigid. So I can look at this one and say, you know, I'm not too worried about this one. Let's dismiss that warning. And I can add a comment to this so that anyone else building this project will know why this has been dismissed. And I could say, not a real issue at present, and say OK. And now I've dismissed that warning. Now, there's a couple of problems with being able to dismiss a warning like that. How do I manage these warnings? How do other people know what I've dismissed? And how do I go about reversing that dismissal, if you like? And I think that's a very pretty important part of the manageability of that, if you like. So the way in which we can do that is to go into the project and edit the database. And the database editor shows me all the warnings for the database that are possible, including, for instance, all the dimension design warnings. And I can also see the warning that I have already dismissed. Now I can go in here and decide to revive this warning, if you like, by re-enabling it, or I could just leave it as being dismissed. In this case, let's re-enable it. Somebody come back in and said, this is actually a real issue. It is something we should be concerned about. And let's add that one again. But we may look at some of the low priority warnings for dimension design and say, you know, for this database, I'm really not concerned about setting attribute types that are not compatible. So let's just dismiss that one globally and add a comment for that. I can say, not worried about this. And I've now set a global comment and globally dismissed this for this database. So what we've seen here is a couple of pretty interesting things, I think. One is a set of interactive warnings that are not intrusive, but do help you design the best cube that you can while you're building. And then a global system for managing those warnings. Now, something else we should point out about this is that these warnings are all generated by the AMO object model. As a result, they can be queried by anyone who's using the AMO interfaces, and also they're available as a set of policies in Management Studio, so it's possible to set up policies when managing the cube that say, if anyone builds a cube with too many of these hierarchies and without hierarchies and non-parent child dimensions, warn the administrator of the database that there's a problem as well, not just at design time. So these warnings are available throughout the life cycle of the cube. What we've demonstrated here is the way they're kind of pleasantly visually available at design time. With that, switch back to Julie to talk about the rest of the features there.
Sure, thank you, Donald. That was really good, exciting stuff coming. So we move back into the deck and just quickly following up on the design tool that we just saw Donald go through, how some of these tools, as part of, in combination with the warnings, will actually drive and help users design more powerful cubes. So actually take some of the learnings at design time and make sure they are optimized before you even put them in production. So really powerful tool there, where the idea really is to put it at the hands of users, make it very easy to access them and find out where it makes sense to actually go in and make changes. And the other part of it is basically the aggregation designer, which is somewhat related to some of the aggregation problems that we mentioned before. And the idea of this tool is simply to provide a easy-to-use interface where you can actually have an overview of all your aggregations. So what aggregations have already been performed, to make it much easier for you to go in and manage them afterwards, so you don't keep going in and redo your aggregation. So with that, we move on to the last phase, or the second phase, sorry, which is the runtime, the actual performance. And there's several improvements there that we'll be talking about, but the primary one here is what we call subspace computation. Not really a meaningful title, so let me try and explain what that is. So the focus of subspace computation is really all about making the engine run faster. So it's also, we also talk about it as block computation. And the premise of this is really to make what we call a sparse cubes run faster. And what do we mean by sparse cubes? It's really looking at large cubes where you have many dimensions and many attributes. You kind of have many intersections between the dimensions where you actually won't have any values. So luckily we don't store them. It's null values, and we don't store them. So we don't see any. It was, at least with Analysis Services 2005, we don't see any data explosion. It's still very condensed cubes. So in that sense, it doesn't cause any performance hits. But what happens is when we actually go in and do the computations, when we start doing our aggregations, the actual formula engine will go in and check each space to see what we need to do with that. So if you look, here is the graphical representation of what this will actually look like. So you have on your left, you have two grinders. On the left, you have the situation that is currently existing in 2005, where you basically, if you look at an area, you take all cells, so the dots are values, so you have 3 values in each of these in this cross-section. But when you do the computation, you actually go in cell by cell and see, what do I have to do? You realize it's a null, so you move on, but you still actually go in each cell when you do your computation. So with the release of 2008, we are building in warnings to tell you only where we have non-null values. So here, for example, you would see, you would go in and read and say, we only have 3 values. That is what being computed, and that spits out the results. So basically, the whole computation, the calculation engine will have a much less data to work with. And to show this in action, I think we have one more demo, Donald. So I will hand that back to you.
Thank you very much, Julie. Let's share my desktop again and see if we're successful in doing this. And let's say OK, start sharing, and see what's going to be available. So again, people can shout if they can't see this. But what you should be seeing on screen is SQL Server Management Studio, and on the screen you'll see two separate queries. They're both the same, but they're going against different servers. My first query at the bottom, let's look at this one, is going against a current release of Katmai, the SQL Server 2008. It's the current CTP that's publicly available. Above that, I have a connection to a special build, the most recent build that I'm using of SQL Server 2008, which has this specific feature enabled, the block computation enabled. Now, what I'm going to do is start the query against the older server, which is equivalent to what you would see in 2005. So let me just select that and execute, and it's going to start doing its query. Meanwhile, let's have a look at the query that we're actually going to execute. What I'm looking for is I'm really looking for products in cities on a year-to-date basis. Now, as it happens, every product is not going to be sold in every city. There's going to be many small cities in my AdventureWorks geography database, which many of these products have never been sold in. There's going to be some cities where every product's been sold with large stores. But in many cases, I'm going to have many cities in my database where these products just simply haven't been sold to this date. So I'm going to have many nulls in my matrix. So let's start this query and execute, and let's see how this does against 2008. And in fact, it took less than 5 seconds to perform that query. And you can see that the 2005 equivalent query is still running. Now, if I show you this query, you'll see that many of the results here are null. Lots and lots of null queries. Not totally null. You can see that some of them are actually returning results. Here in 2005 at the bottom has now completed. It took 1 minute to do what block computation, subspace computation, has enabled us to do in 5 seconds. So that's a tremendous performance improvement on this particular kind of query. Now, I want to be clear that this performance improvement is specific to this kind of query. But on the other hand, I also want to emphasize that this particular query we're issuing is not terribly unusual. This is a fairly typical kind of query that you'd be doing for any sort of running sum calculation, where we're actually counting, in this case, a year-to-date fiscal calculation. So you'll see that that's a tremendous performance improvement, which for specific circumstances is going to give us great results. Now, one other thing that we want to talk about here is the way in which we may monitor the performance of your server. It's one thing to see great performance. It's another thing to know how the performance of the server is actually doing. So what I'm going to show you is a couple of other features. Let me just close down these queries and not save them. And I'm just going to open here some of the monitoring features that we have. Now, what we've enabled for monitoring are some schema queries, some system style queries, which are effectively the equivalent of dynamic management views in the SQL Server. You can think of these, in fact, as being dynamic management views for analysis services. So in the first case, I can discover who is connected and what connections are available on my server. I'm going to execute this query, and you'll see that we're releasing, giving here a lot of connection information. A lot of columns of information here, telling me things about the host application and so on. If I want to know what details are available in the schema, I can do a metadata query to find out what columns are available. So let's just do that. In this case, I'm going to select from the schema columns, and I can see all the different columns that are available for connections. And you can see that, for instance, I can find the connection start time, the connection username, the connection, the last command that was issued. What would be interesting here, of course, is this host application. Let me show you this in action. When I execute this simple query, which is going to return just a few columns, you'll see that there's actually a connection host application. And you'll see that many of these are queries from the Management Studio. Now, this host application is something that people are somewhat unaware of. A host application is a way of being able to tell analysis services who is actually connecting or what application is connecting. I can show it to you in action if I go connect to a remote machine. Let me just go through here and add my password here. Now in this case, I'm connecting from the MDX sample application. And let me just click on here and add this new parameter. Or this was actually supported in 2005, but a lot of people simply don't know about it. I'm going to put in here that the application is MDX sample TechNet. And now I'm making a connection to this server using an application which I have given a custom name of MDX sample TechNet. Back to my Management Studio, and let's run this query again and expand it, and you can see that MDX sample TechNet now appears as the application name. This is a very, very useful feature, especially for anyone who's writing custom client applications who would want to be able to use this. So having done that for connections, I may also want to do it for sessions. So let's look again at some session queries. And again, I can do the same thing. I can do a schema query to find out what session columns are available to describe sessions. And you'll see that I've got useful information like the SPID, the name of the process that's running, the ID of the process that's running. I can see the last command issued. I can see when that last command, when that last command was issued. I can see how long has elapsed since that command, and I can start to see very important features such as the CPU time that a session is taking, and I can see the number of reads and writes that that session is taking. Now that starts to tell me not only who's on my server, but what kind of load they're placing on my server. And in particular, I'd be able to look at this and say, my goodness, there's something kind of running away here on my server that's causing far too much CPU time, taking far too much read, taking far too many writes, and is affecting the performance of my other users. So let's do a quick query here, and you can see the difference between, say, selecting to see what sessions historically have been running on the server. This will show me all the sessions since the last restart of the service. Or I can select where session status equals 1. And when I do that, I see just the current sessions. And you'll see that the current session is this one that I'm connected to. And the last command, in fact, was that query that I've just issued. Let's do something else then. Let's go back to my server, my remote server, and connect in from another machine. And what I'd like to do here is, well, I'm going to just select the MS Sales Cube, and I'm going to write a query which is, frankly, going to cause me some real problems if this was in production. Don't do this at home, as they say, from MS Sales. Now, you can imagine what this query is going to do. It's going to take a long time to actually process this. The number of measures we have in the MS Sales Cube is enormous. So I'm going to click Run on this query. There we go, query starting up. Back to Management Studio, and in this case I'm going to play the role of the outraged administrator who discovers that performance on the server is appalling, and I'm going to find out what's going on. So I execute this query, and I discover that somebody is eating up all my CPU time, and somebody is eating up all my session reads, and is really stressing my server quite considerably. And I can see that the reason they're doing that is because they've issued this kind of crazy command. It would be good if I could cancel this. So I see that their session SPID is 423115. So time to open an XMLA query, and right here. At this point, I'm just going to go 423115. I'm going to execute this XMLA query, and that'll tell me that that query has canceled. So I've canceled that query that was causing all the stress on the server. If I go back to my remote desktop and have a look and see what happened there, you'll see that we've returned the fact that the operation has been canceled. So this is something that we have introduced in 2008. In 2005, you could cancel query, but queries didn't necessarily cancel immediately. They canceled when they had an opportunity to cancel. In 2008, we've introduced, I guess, what you could call reliable cancel, which is that you can immediately ask a session to cancel, and it will cancel all the sessions. In fact, I can go to the point where if I look at this session, 423125, which is the current session I'm using, I can actually do something fairly interesting, which is I can cancel my own session, and that completed successfully. And now whatever I try to do is going to fail because I've cancelled my own session, which pretty comprehensively puts an end to this demo. And we can switch back to Julie.
Thank you, Donald. So this was really a good example of both what are the effects of the actual block computations and how that comes to life, as well as this resource monitoring. So the resource monitoring has really been a request that we have had from over and over and over from IT. So it's a IT-driven request, and we were not really planning on focusing on including this in 2008, but when we've done kind of reviews with customers and partners, this has been from IT the #1 request. So as you can see, it really allows you to go in and see who is connected, what are they running, for how long are they running, as Donald ended the demo, how much resources are they using, and actively go in and actually disable the processes if they go in and block the resources that's blocking up on the server. So really, really powerful, which a lot of customers will truly benefit from in their production system. So Donald, before you go too far away, maybe you want to just add a few comments to some of the data mining improvements that we will have with SQL Server 2008.
Yes, thanks very much. Yeah, in my new role as PM for data mining, I think I ought to speak to this one. We have some improvements in data mining for 2008, which are really quite interesting. I think the most interesting thing that we should say, though, is that a lot of the work that we've done in data mining over the last kind of release cycle has been in building out the data mining add-ins for Office. Talk a little bit about that in a moment. But the features that we've done have been to improve our engine and to improve the algorithms. For example, our time series now has the choice between the ArtXP algorithm, which was an algorithm developed by Microsoft Research, and a more traditional algorithm called ARIMA. And we've done something really interesting where you can merge the two algorithms and actually get the best of ArtXP and the best of ARIMA because they're suitable for different cases. ArtXP being suitable for short-term predictions, and ARIMA being more suitable perhaps for long-term predictions. If not more suitable, then certainly better understood by traditional data miners. So we've introduced this kind of blended algorithm, which is going to be really interesting for time series. We've also done a lot of work in the mining structure. The mining structure is basically a cached set of data that's used for building and training models. Now, one of the things that we've done here is enable people to build filtered models, which is to say that you can now build a model, say if you're running a clothing store, you can build a model for male customers and a separate model for female customers, which would find quite distinctive patterns without actually having to create two separate mining structures. Another thing we've introduced, which is related to that, is the ability to query against the structured data. So for example, if you have found through a clustering model an interesting cluster of customers, you can now drill through to the underlying data and find things like those customers' email addresses and use that in, say, a marketing campaign. Another feature we've introduced is so-called cross-validation, which is a way of getting a set of statistical measures of the accuracy and performance of the model. And that will enable us to do really quite compelling scenarios, such as building several models and automatically comparing them and see which one gives us the best statistical analysis. The result of that is quite improved modeling capabilities, rather than having to put a lot of effort into considering what was likely to be the best model. It's now much easier to build several models and compare them like for like, and to do, for example, some really compelling analysis of which models are going to be most appropriate for your particular scenario. Now finally, as I said, I mentioned the 2007 Microsoft Office system. We've provided a set of add-ins here which enable you to do really quite complex data mining within Excel. If you have SQL Server 2005 or 2008, and if you have the Microsoft Office System 2007, there is a free download, absolutely no extra cost, which enables you to do data mining within the Office environment with 3 separate add-ins. One is a Visio add-in, which allows you to visualize the models, which is actually pretty useful for documentation and sharing. There's an add-in for the experienced data miner, which enables you to build mining models, train them, validate them within the Excel environment. But for the information worker, for the Office end user, there's actually a set of features called the table analysis tools, which provide really simplified data mining, effectively like a one-click scenario where you just say, go and find categories in my data, and without any further intervention, we'll go and find run a categorization and give you a report on the categories that we found in your data. Similarly, for finding outliers or doing forecasting, it's effectively a kind of task-driven experience where with one or two clicks of the mouse you can say, go perform this task. Don't worry about what algorithms are going to be built. Don't worry about what the inputs are too much. Don't worry about all the different parameters that you might set in a classic data mining scenario. Just go do the best you can with this and return me an analysis, and we'll return a very effective analysis for you. So that's proving to be very, very popular with Office users who are getting excited about the ability to have this analysis in the system of choice for them, which is typically the Excel environment. So with that, I think we're ready to wrap up. Julie, you've got some slides to close off with?
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. So two final slides, this one just to wrap up. So looking at the design areas, focus areas for SQL Server 2008 to improve design, performance, and end-user experience. This is really how we bring that overall value to the Microsoft BI platform here delivered by SQL Server that will allow you to integrate any data, deliver relevant information through reporting services, so either push or pull information to the users that need it, and finally enable that to end users to understand why things are happening, why changes are occurring, and drive those actionable insights to benefit from the BI investments that companies are doing in the organization. So just very quickly, the last call to action, just wanted to point out some of the links to where you can go and learn more. So there's more webcasts on SQL Server 2008 in general. There, I would strongly encourage you to download the community technology previews, the CTPs. The latest one is CTP4, where some of the stuff we've shown today will be in, some of it will not, but that will come later on. Use it, provide feedback. We can still change things and really want to hear how you're experiencing the changes we are making. I wanted to call out the data warehouse session. Since we didn't go into details on that here, there's a link for that too. And in general, for a lot of the overall content on the value of SQL Server 2008, what will be coming, what are the different improvements, please go out and visit the web page on the SQL Server for future version, and we will continuously update that with new information as long as more content are being released. So with that, I would like to send back to Heather. Thank you very much for attending.
All right, thank you so much, Julie. There are a number of questions in the queue, so we can get to those and answer some of those in just a minute if Julie and Donald want to take a look and pick a few. I'd also like to remind everyone that you can print a PDF of the slides by going up to the File menu in the upper navigation bar. That's a great way to get all of those resources that Julie was talking about. Right now I'm going to go ahead and launch our survey for today. You should be seeing it showing up in your slide area in just a moment. All you need to do to fill out the survey is click on those links that you see in the middle of the screen. We do appreciate your feedback. It helps us to improve our future sessions. And with that, Julie, are there any questions that you want to address?
There's a few questions there. One is regarding Report Builder and if it's possible to implement conditional formatting. And a lot of the changes for Report Builder are still in work in progress, so I can't really confirm what will be there. But what you will be seeing is hopefully the focus on making it easier to change between the actual report designer for developers and end user authoring. So we will see a lot of those more powerful capabilities be pushed down to the end users. Exactly how it's going to play out for 2008, we don't know yet. A couple of more months and we will know more. And I hope to do more webcasts going into details about each of the improvements that we will be having. Then there's a question on saying that reporting services doesn't integrate well with analysis services. Will 2008 fix that? So we'll be doing some changes, but for as it is right now, there's not huge areas we will be doing in specifically that. We will get to the same level as we was with 2005, and we've done some improvements, but it's not one of the core what you will see change in 2008. And I think that's about it.
All right. Thank you so much, Julie and Donald, for your presentation today. I'd like to remind everyone to take a moment to fill out the survey prior to exiting the session room. Thank you all for joining us today. You may now disconnect from the audio portion of today's conference.